one of the things I think that we as Christians tend to do is we tend to get saved. We tend to have an experience. We tend to come to the altar, and maybe some of the big things in our lives change. We stop going to the clubs. We stop running around with people. We stop maybe stealing. We stop these big things in our lives. But there's more that needs to take place. A lot of times we get to a point as Christians, and that's that first initial, yeah, let's do this. And we get to a point, and we stall. We stall out as Christians. I want to read to you Romans 12, 1 through 2. Paul says it this way. Therefore, I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. I want to touch base with you real quick on that verse. In view of God's mercy. The first thing we see here is God has a right to ask what he's asking. God has every right to ask what he's asking. You know how sometimes you may work somewhere, or you may, be in a situation where someone in authority over you asks you or tells you, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And you've never seen that person stand up, get off their backside, and do some work. Anybody ever been in a situation like that? You're sitting here going, why do you have any right to ask me to do anything? You sit on your tush. How do we say it on the bus? Put your tush on the cushion, right? Right, Cece? Yeah. And they've got their tush on the cushion, and they're asking you to do all the work. The problem that happens there is you're sitting here going, what right does this person have to ask me to do anything? And that's just human nature. You get frustrated. You're like, I'm doing it all. He's sitting there. He's making 3 or 4 times as much as I am. What is going on here? And a lot of times we begin to compare in our minds. Well, why does that person have a right to ask me to do anything? We do it with our political situations. Well, I don't like that person. Why? He doesn't have a right to tell me to do anything. That's how you get some of these militias formed. That's how you get people who have these websites that they put out, or these ideals, and they put all these things out, and they're throwing it all in the face of the government. The government has no right, and it's human nature to be that way. But when it comes to what God asks us to do, he has every right. Why? Because he humbled himself lower than any of us. God came to earth. He became as a human. He became human. He had body odor. He had scraped knees. He lived life. Not only did he had siblings. And how many of you know that sometimes you get around siblings? I've got an older brother, Todd. If you see this, I love you. Sometimes their feet stink. You know what I mean? Sometimes you got to put up with things, and you're like, yeah, that joke wasn't funny. And they just annoy you, You got to put up with it. He came to this earth. Kelsey's back there looking at Caleb going, I live with that every day. Okay, Kelsey, it's all right. I saw you. Caleb didn't see you. Pointed it out. There you go. You can get her after church. We have all these things that we put up with as humans. He came and chose to put up with all of that. If we had our choice, we would separate ourselves from those things. We would make our brothers or sisters be cooler. Let's just face it. They'd be more like we are. They'd be cooler like us. Okay? And they're saying the same exact thing. He put up with all of that, and then he allowed himself to be accused. He allowed himself to be accused unjustly. He allowed himself to be beaten without fighting back. He allowed himself to go to the cross and be put to death. He humbled himself. In view of that mercy, Paul is saying, in view of God's mercy, and when he says it, in view of God's mercy, he's saying, in view of all that has been done. In view of the fact that we're still walking on the planet because he had a right to, and he didn't. In fact, he even promised not to. But instead, he sent us a way out. In view of that mercy,